Hello there, welcome to How to Explain Therapy, where I am going to explain in my 12 years now of care how it's very difficult to actually be a carer, and the fact is that you end up almost being in a position where you have to view abuse and can't physically do anything about it because nobody really understands how it's technically abuse. I'm going to run through a few examples of my own experiences. I've tried to be that brave whistleblower many times in the sort of setting of the care home, and I've been abused, bullied, sort of chosen as a scapegoat. Actually, they've turned the tides on me and tried to get evidence on me that I've abused people just to get me out and moved on and quickly out of the position. This is management and higher management. And I'm just going to go through a few examples and just talk about, first of all, why care is such a difficult thing to do in any environment. You see, for care to be absolutely perfect, it means that there must be no bottom to the amount of money that you can spend on someone's individual care. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't exist anywhere in the world apart from a crazy government campaign that a campaign to get somebody elected as Prime Minister. I would see they have a bottomless pit of money. But when it comes to care and private care and national health care, there is a budget. Now, this budget covers food costs, the equipment that's being used, the type of care staff that you have, the rate of pay that this care staff and the nursing all these different features have. So straight away there's a massive problem that when you look after different human beings, I've worked in disability, I've worked in brain injuries, I've worked in mental health, I've worked in dementia, elderly care, and it is just throughout the whole system, accidentally, if you like, struggling to maintain the needs of the individual server. Now, this is a particular, reason why I went into self-employed caring, and why I will only now work as a flexible sort of carer that has to not highlight any types of this sort of mild abuse, because I would lose my job again. This has happened in every place that I've worked. I've worked for a Majesty's prison, and this is corrupt with abuse, with bullies, with people abusing. I don't want to just say prisoners. I've seen the hierarchy of the governors abuse, and the abuse just carries on going down to the staff, whoever's underneath the person being abused. So it's in all walks of life. I'm sure you've had this in your role, and I'm sure that you're putting up with it right now. And to be honest, it's never going to change, because we're just not clever enough as a group of people to really stand against this sort of abuse. But I want to break down the problems of being a carer and why people can't actually care emphatically. And there's two types of carers for me. I think there's probably a spectrum of different carers amongst this, but the most general two that I ever saw was somebody who was overly connected to the client. This was an emotional person, very loving, and almost treated everybody, or certainly their sort of favourites. And you do have favourites as a human being, you can't help this, so don't knock that and see it as a bad thing. But what I'm describing now, this really loving person with full emotion, sounds to you like, wow, I want this person to look after my mum and dad. But it loses out on a lot of professionalism, which I'm going to speak about later. So you've got that person who's completely loving, heart is on their sleeve, and they fight and do everything and come in early for a certain resident, leave late for a certain resident, and they go out of the way to do this extra mile. And I'm going to tell you in a minute why that's actually not bad, not 100% bad, but not 100% good either. There's a fine line between it. And the second most common carer that I saw was someone who just didn't have a loving bone in their body, didn't have a heart whatsoever. And the whole point of being a carer, it says a carer, but you have to care. And I saw people who didn't care. They basically performed personal care and the most personal sort of interactions you would ever have with people on end of life, with people in a difficult situation, an embarrassing situation. They would deal with this as if they was collecting trolleys around a car park. It was just mechanical, and to the point where they abuse people. And I can also say that the emotional people end up abusing people accidentally as well. So you have the two dynamics. For me, you have to be a balanced carer. The only way you get that balance is obviously years of experience, but also the knowledge of why it's important to have this 50-50 of the two carers. One, to understand that it is just a job that you get paid for, and you should just work your 7 till 3 shift because you're bound by this system. And second of all, why it is important that you do connect and treat everybody like your mum and dad, but how not to get attached to the emotional feeling of that and instead make it a professional feeling. I worked in a place where only lasted one day because there was a young client who had no parents, and the manager of the property allowed the girl to call her mum, and this girl was, I think she was about 9 or 10, and I thought this was just wrong. Now, I know what you're first of all conscious of going to think, that's got no parents, she's connected with somebody, this is great. I'm going to tell you now my explanation, which I walked into the office and said I have a problem with what I'm seeing. I believe that you shouldn't pass that line and allow this to go on. And the reason being is that manager is not going to stay in that person's life for eternity. She's not going to adopt this person. She has a professional duty to this person to make her understand that unfortunately she hasn't got any parents at the moment, and how not to get mixed up with her being the mum. Because when you have a traumatic experience at a young age of losing a mother or father or both, the last thing you want is this manager at some point in their life getting a promotion down in London, or getting a job offer abroad, or just simply going off a year at a time pregnant because she's got a family, and this daughter asking where this make-believe illusionary mum is. For me, this builds the possibility of a traumatic experience that's going to happen and connect to an old experience. And I was instantly dismissed. They were mortified at my comments, and I just couldn't understand why they couldn't see this, and I was told to leave. Another time I've raised up abuse where other individuals are shouting at people with disabilities as if you have some sort of right and some sort of parental right because you have this bond and this connection, and you're passing a professional line. You can be emphatic, sympathetic, loving, caring. You can have this big heart, but it doesn't mean that when that person falls, you can't react professionally because you're in a panic, you're scared. This is your mother or father, this illusionary figure that you've created. And then you just go into pure, and I've seen this with nurses. Nurses in care homes in an emergency are the worst people to call because they're in a panic. They don't react, they can't think. They've got this, and I don't even think it's a connection with them because they hardly ever see the residents, and I'm not speaking harshly. There's some great nurses out there, some great carers, just trying to explain the experiences that I've seen, down to just a lack of intelligence and a lack of knowledge on how to really communicate, how to kind of care for somebody without this massive emotional attachment that plunges you into fear, plunges you into emotional tears and makes you cry. Another one that I saw a lot in care was people speaking to the elderly as if they were children, and speaking to disabled people who are mentally children or mentally aged children, and speaking to them like they was adults that could just be consciously aware of a normal sentence. People haven't got the right skills to care for other people, to care fully, hand on heart, to be fully there for somebody else. You have to do so much internal work on yourself. And I know these people don't do it. They are just going through motions, and it means that at the end of it they don't really give a crap about the individual. And this is what I find as abuse. And it means now that I have to sort of somehow try and develop something for me personally on a self-employed level to produce the right care for these vulnerable people. I only recently worked in a place, was there for 12-hour shift, saw 2 incidents of abuse, somebody being force-fed tablets and being forced to drink, and it was just spilling down them. And if I walk into the management, what will happen is that I will be the one that doesn't return to the job, because this is something that's just seen as normal. You have to get tablets down, people, but it's no. If they don't take tablets, it's not your fault. You put that they don't have them. If they don't take tablets for a month, for 6 months, for a year, and it's really bad for their health, that is for psychiatrists and mental health and different systems to come in and sort out, not you to force feed something that is abuse. And one of the other incidents that I've had is I saw somebody in really bad habits, disabled, eating on the floor, and carers just saying that was okay, with disgusting utensils that no one cared because they didn't eat off these, plates and dishes and saucepans and utensils. I saw people wasn't doing what was best for the client, they was doing what was best for them, which meant they stayed in another room far away from the problem and did a 10-hour shift and got paid £10 an hour, and they was walking and laughing all the way to the bank. I highlighted this subtly in the most communicative way that I could, that was brilliant, that wasn't upsetting, because I knew that everybody was just unconscious of what was going on. Within a day, the very own mother who was in charge of the employment sacked me for bringing these issues up. And it's because when you bring issues like this up, it makes people feel uncomfortable. So when you feel uncomfortable, you do the wrong things, you do the wrong actions, you constantly behave in a bad way for yourself personally and for the people around you. You act uncomfortably, so you just constantly project a vile output of that uncomfortable feeling that you have. And if anybody points out the truth, it continues because it's making you feel uncomfortable, and you haven't really got the conscious awareness or the intelligence to just absorb it and say that you're flawed, to say that you're not perfect, but you can grow into that place closer to perfection. You're never going to get perfect. I have days where you make the odd mistake and you do not care as good as you could because of emotional feelings, because of what's going on in your own life, because of that 1 second taking you off the ball, and that's the second that someone decides to do something reckless. But I find too many carers have no understanding of the human psychology and thought processes of what's really going on, and they can't look after themselves, never mind anybody else. It's a tragic story, and I know that these videos, you must watch some of these videos and think they seem to be pointing out negative stuff, but it's for the growth. Going through negative stuff makes you grow and get better. So I'm highlighting this for a carer out there who isn't on top of the game, to understand why they might not be on top of the game, why they struggle to give beautiful care. And it's not to beat anybody up, it's not to hang people out to dry. I didn't go and report these for anyone to get sacked or to lose their jobs, even though I know they deserved it deep down. I know they was unconscious to their abusive behaviour, because we all are. We are all unconscious to our sort of subconscious behaviour that makes us horrible, abusive, only care for one singular person, which is i.e. me, self. And if we just understand this a bit more, then we can actually lose that, first of all, that defence mechanism that says, oh, I'm going to sack you because you're the problem, that's highlighting that my son's got dirty plates, and you're highlighting my son was lying on the floor and you've made him sit at the table. Frightening. And you end up being the biggest abuser. And deep down in your heart, well, you don't actually think that you are or know that you are, but you don't want to be, and you are, and that's what's really sad.